Recording in progress.
Got it all settled?
Ron, there we go. Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome Billy Lowe, the lead pastor with City Church, who will lead us in tonight's invocation.
Thank you. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, you are kind and gracious to us. We come recognizing that and asking that you would lead in discerning and wisdom of every decision that's made. God, we ask for your grace and your mercy on this city, that it would be one that flourishes in every way, that every decision that is made tonight and in the future would glorify you. So Lord, we don't want to make decisions without you. We want to recognize and submit ourselves to you because you are sovereign over all things. So may you be glorified. May you be worshiped. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I would like to call the regular meeting of the Milton City Council for Monday, November 21st, 2022 to order. The city strongly recommends that you review tonight's agenda carefully, and if you wish to speak on any item on the agenda, then please bring your comment cards to the clerk as soon as possible. While the Milton rules allow a speaker to turn in their comment card up until the clerk calls the agenda item, once the agenda item is called, no more comment cards can be accepted. Will the city clerk please call the roll and make general announcements?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll be happy to call roll for the November 21st regular City Council meeting. I would like to remind those in attendance to please silence all cell phones at this time. Those attending the meeting who would like to make a comment, you are required to complete a public comment card. Your comment card must be presented to the city clerk prior to the agenda item being called. Any comment cards received after the item has been called will not be accepted. All speakers, please identify yourself by name, address, and organization before beginning your comment. If you are representing an organization, an affidavit is required stating you have the authority to speak on that organization. Please review tonight's agenda, and if you would like to make a comment, please bring your comment card to me now. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited. Please refrain from any applause, cheering, outburst, or booing with anyone speaking. Anyone in violation will be asked to leave. As I call roll this evening, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Peyton Jamison.
Here.
Councilmember Andrea Veerhoff. Here. Councilmember Paul Moore.
Here.
Councilmember Jan Jacobus.
Here.
And Councilmember Rick Morrig.
Here.
And for the record, Councilmember Juliet Johnson and Carol Cookerly are absent. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, council, we need to approve the meeting agenda, and I would like to add an executive session to discuss land acquisition, personnel, and potential litigation.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the agenda as read with the adjustments that you just asked for.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Moore and a second from Councilmember Verhoff to approve the agenda as read with the addition of the executive session. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. Next is general public comment. Do we have public comment?
Mayor, we do not have any, sir.
Okay, so I'll waive the public comment, and I'll ask the city clerk to please call the next item.
Mayor, that next item is, bear with me, the consent agenda. The first item is approval of the November 7th, 2022 regular city council meeting minutes. It's agenda item number 22350. Item B is approval of the November 10th, 2022 special called council meeting minutes, agenda item number 22351. Item C is approval of the November 14th, 2022 work session meeting minutes, agenda item number 22352. Item D is approval of the financial statements and investment report for period 11, August 2022, agenda item number 22353. Item E is approval of a construction services agreement between the City of Milton and ATL Pressure Wash LLC for the cleaning and preparation of City Hall for exterior painting. Agenda item number 22354. Item F is approval of a construction services agreement between the City of Milton and 54 Faith, Inc., doing business as 5 Star Painting for exterior painting of Milton City Hall and Community Place. Agenda item number 22355. Item G is approval of a recreation provider agreement between the City of Milton and Rivalka Kids LLC, doing business as Kid Create Studio, to provide recreational art classes and camps. Agenda item number 22356. Item H is approval of a professional services agreement between the City of Milton and Juan Cuero, doing business as JQ AV Techs, for the configuration and operation of the city's AV equipment during city meetings. Agenda item number 22357. Item I is approval of change order number 2 of professional services agreement with Pond and Company to increase maximum contract price for the Big Creek Greenway Connection Trail Project. Agenda item number 22358. J is approval of task order number 5 to provide design services for the Big Creek Greenway Connection Trail Project with Pond. It's agenda item number 22359. Item K is approval of professional services agreement between the City of Milton and Alexander Gephardt to provide human resources consulting services. Agenda item number 22360. Our final item, L, is approval of subdivision plats and revisions. The name of the development is Cornelia and Dorel Nasdaq, 2315 Dinsmore Road, Land Lot 533, District 2, Section 2. It is a minor plat to subdivide the property into 2 lots. Lot 1 will contain 1.194 acres, and Lot 2 will contain 1.8 acres, with a total of 2.994 acres and a density of 0.66 lots per acre. Mayor, it's agenda item number 22361. Mayor?
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as read.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Morgan, a second from Councilmember Jacobus to approve the consent agenda as read. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. So we'll move on to reports and presentations. Will the city clerk please sound the first item?
Mayor, that first item is a proclamation recognizing the Milton Volunteer Fire Corps for surpassing 1,000 service hours milestone. Mayor?
Thank you. So it is my honor here to recognize the Milton Volunteer Fire Corps. We have a great group here. They've dedicated countless hours and service to our community. And after I read the proclamation, I'll invite Steve Corey to come up and introduce some of the members that are here tonight. So whereas the Milton Volunteer Fire Corps formed in 2021 to support the Milton Fire Rescue Department and its dedicated members, and whereas this citizen group is affiliated with Fire Corps, a national grassroots effort to help fire EMS departments enhance their services by assisting with non-emergency tasks, and whereas the Milton Volunteer Fire Corps has grown from a few individuals to a robust, committed, hardworking group who are making a positive impact, and whereas a primary responsibility is rehab, which involves helping keep firefighters from Milton and neighboring departments safe, secure, and healthy at incidents, and whereas Milton Volunteer Fire Corps members have done that as well as promoting firefighters' long-term health with a focus on cancer prevention, and whereas they have also been innovative, creative, and open to helping in many other ways, such as vaccine clinics, improving fire stations, providing resources, and even landscaping. And whereas the Milton Fire Corps has contributed to the fire department and our community in more and more ways, having recently surpassed over 1,000 volunteer hours. Now, therefore, we, the mayor and city council of the city of Milton, recognize the Fire Corps members' dedication, their support, and congratulate them on reaching this milestone. And this is given under our hand and seal of the city of Milton on this 21st day of November 2022. Steve, if you can come on up and introduce some of the members, and we'll do a presentation and take some pictures.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and City Council for this proclamation. We're very proud to receive it. We are a group of residents, citizens of Milton, who greatly appreciate the services of our fire, police, EMS, first responders, and Fire Corps was founded to serve those who serve us. Tonight, I've got with us several members of the Fire Corps. Jim Loffridge, do you want to stand up when I say your names? Jim Loffridge, John Nyung. John is in Morocco, I think, tonight. So Ron Bush and Donna Bush, Conroy Keating, Amy Donnelly, Paddy and Peter Fredland, Dr. Sundak Ganasan, Megan Ganesan, Akash Ganesan, and Suraj Ganesan. They've been tremendous in the clinics. Dr. Ganesan is a CDC doctor. Tyler Girding and Doug Heen, Michelle Lopes, Lisa Lockridge, Bala Balakrishna, Sarah Rich and Tony Rich. Tony, as you know, is the chairman of the Equestrian Committee and helps us as well. George Sarno. George is an ex-firefighter from Roswell. Scott Stokowski and Bart Van Tighem. Bart is, I think, the chairman of the Beekeeper Club for Milton as well. So we have quite a roster. So I want to just say thank you very much, and thank you to all our members too. Appreciate it. And especially to our chief, of course.
Of course.
This wouldn't be possible. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
Stay. You stay, Jan.
Hey,
Sit, Jan.
you,
Y'all can come down for a picture, please. Well, is there, I'll give them to you. You can, I'll leave them in, yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Steve?
Thanks, guys.
Congratulations.
You guys really do.
Thank you all.
Come over here.
Mayor.
Thanks for all you do.
And you're right there. You can go ahead and give that one to Steve if you'd like. Let Steve have
You
that
guys
one.
get-
Just hustling, don't worry.
Yeah, it's there behind. Yeah, get a little bit closer. Photo
You got that,
arrangement.
Tony?
That's right. Yeah. Tony, get a little bit closer.
Snuggle up.
You're fitting up. You're good. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Great. Thank you.
Okay,
Awesome.
thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, that will be done with our reports and presentations. Will the city clerk please stay on the next item?
Mayor, that next report and presentation item is discussion of occupational tax process and the fee structure. Our Assistant City Manager, Ms. Bernadette Harville.
Where'd you go? Oh, there.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we will be discussing Milton's occupational tax process and fee structure and the potential for updates to each as outlined in the city's current strategic plan. I've been working alongside our Finance Director, Karen Ellis, and our Economic Engagement Manager, Anita Jupin, and our Planner 2, Emily Schnari, on this topic. Our goal this evening is to present information that will provide context to Council for the feedback we are seeking in this initial phase of the project. We will stop periodically throughout the presentation to request this feedback, and we are also happy to answer any questions you may have or research additional information you may need related to this topic. These conversations may lead to the need to review other Milton ordinances, but tonight's presentation will focus on Chapter 12, Business Regulation and Taxation. At this time, we will not be discussing any zoning considerations or making any zoning decisions unless guided to do so by Council, and those changes would proceed through the traditional zoning process inclusive of a CZIM and Planning Commission review. First, we will go over the objective of the project as a whole, as well as what specific feedback our team is seeking from Council this evening. We will go over some definitions specific to the topic of occupational taxes that will help clarify some of the content being presented. We will discuss state authorized methods of calculating occupational taxes, and then we will take a closer look at how Milton currently calculates these taxes versus the calculation methods being utilized in neighboring communities. Karen will discuss Milton's business demographics by showing you where Milton's current businesses exist. She will share a breakdown of our current businesses by fee type, as well as business activity. And finally, she will discuss the revenue breakdown by fee type. We will then compare Milton's revenue collections to those of our surrounding jurisdictions and discuss some potential revenue impacts based on potential changes to the city's occupational tax fee structure. Following Karen, Anita will go over some specific considerations and a sample business survey we would like to send out as part of our stakeholder input process. Finally, we will go over the projected project timeline and obtain any final feedback from council. Our team has put together the following project objective based on the current 5-year strategic plan. If council is in favor of this objective, our team will review the existing occupational tax process and fee structure to determine if any updates are necessary to meet this objective, which is creating a simplified occupational tax process and fee structure, which attracts businesses that fit into a cohesive, community-driven vision for Milton and further reduces Milton's reliance on property tax revenues. This objective ties directly to strategic priority number 1, goal number 1, objectives number 1 and 2. And we are happy to make any adjustments to this objective if council would like to make any recommendations at this time. We're good? Okay, excellent. So we'll continue based on this objective for this project. Now that we have an overall project objective in place, there is some initial feedback our team would like to obtain tonight to ensure we're moving in the right direction with our research and any proposed updates that may come out of that research. We'll stop periodically throughout the presentation to gather input on potential fee structure options, potential local exemptions and other Milton-specific considerations, the proposed business owner stakeholder survey, the overall project timeline and possible implementation time frame, and finally, we would like to gather any other feedback or guidance council may have related to this topic that we should be keeping in mind as we begin this process. Before we proceed, our team thought it was important to provide a handful of definitions that will help offer context to some of the information we'll be discussing this evening. First, what is an occupational tax? This is a tax that is levied on persons, partnerships, corporations, or other entities for engaging in occupation, profession, or business. Some people still refer to this as a business license. Just to clarify, this process is not licensing an establishment. It is truly a tax that local jurisdictions are authorized to collect for the purposes of raising revenue, and the local jurisdiction issues an occupational tax certificate signifying the payment of these taxes as opposed to a business license. The fee itself is made up of 2 components, the tax and an administrative fee. The administrative fee approximates the reasonable cost of handling and processing the tax to include staff, equipment, software, etc. In Milton, review of these applications requires review and input from zoning, fire, economic engagement, and finance. So this fee covers those costs at the current rate of $75 per application. It is in line with other communities in the surrounding area. For the purposes of an occupational tax ordinance, employees are W-2 employees and do not include 1099 employees. This will be an important distinction when we discuss methodologies for calculating the tax later in this presentation. Similarly, the concept of gross receipts will play an important role in this discussion. Here you can see the definition. Gross receipts means the total revenue of the business or practitioner for the given period. The definition goes further to detail what is and what is not included when calculating gross receipts. As part of the process improvements, we have identified other jurisdictions that are doing a really good job of explaining what is and what is not included in gross receipts on their applications. And our team plans to implement this type of clarification on Milton's application should the gross receipts method be what is ultimately decided on for the method of calculation moving forward in Milton. When calculating occupational taxes, the state authorizes 4 methods: a fee based on the number of employees a business has, a fee based on what is referred to as the profitability ratio, which is the entity's net income divided by their gross receipts, and this is done on a nationwide average basis. We have not found many local jurisdictions that utilize this methodology on its own, so we will not really be focusing on this evening, but I just wanted to point out that the state does authorize this. The next method, gross receipts, does take into consideration the profitability ratio and is the more popular of the 2 receipts-based methods. And finally, there's that flat fee. The state has a separate consideration for professional practitioners in this grouping referred to as the 400 Club. Those practitioners in the box here qualify under this group may opt to pay the lesser of the local applicable fee or that $400 per practitioner. So they have a cap that they are authorized to stay under. This will be important later in our conversation. Before you is Milton's current fee structure. We have one of the more unique fee structures in the group of communities that we have reviewed in this initial stage of our research. Milton's primary fee structure is based on gross receipts, utilizing that profitability ratio we just talked about as determined by the North American Industry Classification System, or NAICS code. We have a master list of codes that corresponds to one of the 24 classes you see to the right. The business takes their gross receipts and multiplies it by the corresponding rate and gets the fee owed. Then a $75 administrative fee is added to get the total tax due. If a business is operating in a residential space and has one employee, they qualify in Milton for a flat home-based fee of $100 plus that $75 administrative fee. Milton also has a third separate fee for those commercial businesses that do not generate gross receipts. Think of a call center, for example, which pays a flat $150 fee plus $77 per full-time equivalent employee plus that $75 administrative fee. And then finally, there's that state-provided flat fee of $400 for qualifying professional practitioners that we must adhere to. As we move on to the explanation of the fee structure for neighboring jurisdictions, I would like to stop and point out the two main complaints that we have received over the years on our fee structure. The first is the difference between the method Milton utilizes compared to those jurisdictions immediately adjacent. So we'll go over that in a minute. That is one of the largest complaints we receive. And secondly, we have the limitations of that state-created 400 club. We have practitioners that believe that they should also qualify, that don't currently under state law, that have often seeked out information from us to potentially allow them into a grouping like that. So those are the two main pieces of feedback that we get as a finance department. As part of our project objective is to attract businesses that fit into a cohesive, community-driven vision for Milton. That attempt to attract businesses, along with addressing some of the feedback we've received that we just went over, has led us to look at these surrounding jurisdictions and compare how they're handling their calculation of occupational taxes. We looked at the immediately adjacent jurisdictions of Cherokee County, Forsyth County, the city of Alpharetta, and the city of Roswell. Additionally, we looked at our other North Fulton neighbors, the city of Johns Creek and the city of Sandy Springs. On this slide, you can see the fee structure for each community broken down. This is a lot of information, but the key points to take away are: 1, most other communities have narrowed down their fee structure to one primary fee type with the inclusion of the state-mandated 400 club alternative. Please note, Alpharetta does currently have a home-based category similar to Milton in their code. 2, Milton falls in between the two fee structures being utilized by these jurisdictions. You have Alpharetta, Cherokee County, and Forsyth County with the primary fee structure based on the number of employees each business has. Then you have Roswell, Johns Creek, and Sandy Springs with a combination of gross receipts plus the number of employees model. Roswell recently changed to this model from a flat fee model, and we will go into that a little later to show the revenue collection predictions that they have based on this change. Milton's gross receipts fee is not combined with a per employee model at this time, so we kind of fall in between these two. Another takeaway is that many jurisdictions have incentives or standard deductions in place. You can see in Cherokee County, taxes are capped at $6,000 per business, and similarly at $10,000 in Alpharetta. Sandy Springs has a cap of $75,000, and Roswell has opted to implement a $100,000 cap. Both Johns Creek and Sandy Springs offer a standard deduction of $20,000 off of the company's calculated gross receipts. And Roswell has also implemented a local hire job incentive that was mentioned on their website. So we will come back to this, but this is, I can stop here if anyone has any questions about this. This is kind of the crux of understanding of where we're going to look at how we compare to these neighboring jurisdictions.
Sorry, did you say Roswell, Johns Creek, Sandy Springs? It's either or?
They have done a combination. So what they do is you go there, you calculate your gross receipts, and then you add on top of that a flat fee for your number of employees, and that comes out with your total tax.
Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm. I tried to do that image by combining those boxes.
And I'm looking at this, looking at the spreadsheets like we're going over alcohol all over again.
Nope, we're going to break this down real easily.
We might need some.
Yeah, so you have them with a combination of the two. Then you have the other communities with just an employee only. And then you have Milton, who's utilizing it almost separately. You have either in a per employee or a gross receipts or that flat fee. And we can come back to this a little later. Oh, skipping ahead. So as you can see, our immediately adjacent communities, with the exception of Roswell, utilize that per employee flat fee calculation. And one of the pieces of feedback we would like to obtain this evening later on is whether or not council would like us to consider, minimizing our payment categories or looking into going into one direction or the other. And we're going to give you a lot more information so you can make that decision. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Karen Ellis, who's our finance director, to discuss some of the specific details about Milton's current businesses.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As we go through the following slides, I'll break down the mix of occupational tax fee types. I'll describe the business types by industry NAICS code, and then I'll review the number of certificates issued and the revenues generated over the past 5 years within the city. This first slide represents a map of where the Milton businesses are located within the city. As you can see, a majority of the businesses located in the Crabapple and Birmingham and Deerfield commercial nodes are tax-based on gross receipts. As we spread out into the residential areas, you'll see that more of the home-based flat fee businesses are assessed in that way. The following pie chart describes the various businesses by NAICS code for all fee types within the city. These codes represent an industry classification utilized at federal statistical agencies in analyzing data related to the U.S. business economy. The 3 major industry types located within Milton are the professional, scientific, and technical services, retail trade, and construction. Some of the business types within the professional services category that would be inside of Milton would be legal, accounting, computer system designs, and public relations. Within the retail trade category, you'll find everything from golf court sales and grocers to gas stations, jewelers, and florists. And then construction business types could include any kind of construction for building, for roads, or for utilities. Now here we have broken out the 3 largest categories within the city of Milton that show the fee type associated with that trade. Most professional service businesses are taxed as a flat fee home-based business with only 24% coming through gross receipts. Contrarily, our retail trade businesses are more heavily concentrated in gross receipts taxation at 62%, with the balance based on the flat rate home-based fee. And lastly, the construction businesses are largely taxed in the flat fee home-based category at 80%, with the balance going to gross receipts. My final slide provides a picture of the number of businesses certified for the past 5 years by the major types that we've just discussed. Now, the number of businesses on the left filed as gross receipts and home-based are almost equal year after year. They're very close, the 2 orange and yellow columns. But as we look to the revenue generated according to these types, you'll notice that the gross receipt businesses generate consistently over 80% of the revenue collected year after year in the city. If the city were to shift away from gross receipts model, we could see a large decline in revenues. Now I'll pass it back to Bernadette. She's going to compare the Milton's revenue collections to those of our surrounding jurisdictions, discuss some of the potential revenue impacts based on potential changes to the city's occupational tax fee structure.
All right, I really appreciate Karen's help explaining what Milton's businesses currently look like and our makeup and how it relates to our current fee structure. On this slide, you can see a bar chart on the left that shows the number of certificates reported in the past 3 annual comprehensive financial reports published by each jurisdiction. Forsyth County has the highest number of businesses at just under 8,000 in 2021, followed by Sandy Springs at 6,000. Cherokee County and Roswell have around 5,000 registered businesses each, and then we have Johns Creek at 4,500, Alpharetta at approximately 4,500, Milton just under 900. The line graph to the right shows the actual revenue collections for FY 2020 and FY 2021, and the budgeted collections for FY 2022 and FY 2023. You can see those jurisdictions with a large number of registered businesses utilizing a per employee model do bring in less revenues than those that have fewer registered businesses and utilize a gross receipts plus employee model. Here you can see the projected increase Roswell anticipates for fiscal year 2023 based on its fee structure change from their flat fee previously that included a flat fee plus their number of employees to the new model of gross receipts plus the number of employees. They are projecting a $4 million increase in revenues based on that change. You can also see that Alpharetta, with over 3,600 more businesses than Milton, currently projecting around $143,000 more in revenues than Milton in fiscal year 2023 based on their per employee model being utilized. Does anyone have any questions about the data presented regarding the...
What kind of pushback is Roswell getting?
We have not surveyed that, but honestly, Roswell is surrounded by Johns Creek and Sandy Springs. I'm not sure if they've seen any pushback yet. I can inquire though.
Gosh.
And And we're kind of sandwiched in the middle there. So here we have our finance team ran numbers to see what Milton's revenues would have looked like in 2022 based on the per employee models of Alpharetta, Cherokee County, and Forsyth County. Please note, we cannot run the models based solely on gross receipts, as we do not have that level of data from our current home base and per employee businesses. An assumption we could make is that there would be certain businesses that would make less than the $100 flat fee, but primarily more of them would probably incur a tax increase based on gross receipts. So in the table before you can see Milton would have collected $790,594 less under the Alpharetta model, $811,574 less under the Cherokee model, and $751,668 less under the Forsyth model, making total revenues go from almost $1 million down to under $200,000 for two out of the three. So that just gives you an idea. Now, this would be if you just mimicked those structures. We can talk about an array of things. We can talk about a per employee model that has different tiers. We can talk about mixing it with some other items. So we have a lot of things we can talk about tonight. It doesn't have to be these, but these were just the examples we showed so you can see what it would look like if we mimicked those structures in our immediately adjacent communities. So now I'll hand it over to Anita, and she's going to talk to you tonight about some Milton-specific potential exemptions, rebates, credits, and other things that we can consider in those fee structures.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I want to briefly go over the concept of statewide and local exemptions. So no matter which type of fee structure that we go with, there are statewide exemptions that exist for certain types of businesses, such as agricultural businesses, veteran-run businesses, et cetera, that are exempt from paying occupational taxes on a state level, and local jurisdictions must adhere to that. But there are also local considerations that we can implement for purposes of economic development. So why would we want to consider local exemptions? These local exemptions can be a critical component to the economic development toolbox that we are working to develop, and can be helpful to attract or maintain certain types of businesses within our community. Local exemptions can send a message to site selectors about the industry types that best fit here in Milton. And it's important to note that these local exemptions and the benefit that they bring to the city must be explicitly defined. So an example of a specific benefit to Milton would be job creation or the retention of jobs in these particular industries. We can also implement a credit or a rebate, or even place a limit on the percentage increase for these certain industries year over year to provide relief as a local tax exemption. So with this in mind, our team is looking for feedback tonight regarding these Milton-specific considerations. Are there certain industries or business types that we want to consider for local exemptions as a tax incentive? The industries that we have identified are outlined here. We have agricultural businesses, equestrian-based businesses, local exemptions for business owners who both live and operate their business within the city as an incentive for keeping their business within their home community, sustainable green businesses, as well as businesses that occupy brick and mortar commercial space. We're experiencing increasing vacancies in commercial office space. This isn't unique to Milton. It's a challenge that's being felt nationwide. We identify vacant office space by communicating regularly with local brokers. We work closely with them as we implement new strategies to attract new tenants. But the impacts of the pandemic have led to many employers shifting to a hybrid or remote work environment. So providing a local exemption would be a way to incentivize a return to work office strategy. At this time, our current fee structure, which offers a flat $175 fee for home-based businesses, could be a way to incentivize these home-based businesses versus incentivizing occupying commercial space. The considerations of local exemptions do come straight from our strategic and comprehensive plans. And if this is something that council would like to consider as a part of this process, we're happy to do further research on these items. And I'll pause here for any questions or feedback.
Do we look into some of what other areas are doing related to tech? Now, it's my understanding that it's pretty aggressive in some surrounding communities to offer large incentives to get the tech companies to come. And I would think for us, especially in the Route 9 Deerfield corridor, it would be very helpful to have some incentives for people to want to maybe develop, take some of that office space or build some new office space based on some exemptions for that.
Absolutely. So I have reached out to my partners in the region just to explore what types of incentives they're using. So there's traditional incentives as well as non-traditional. Alpharetta, for example, just being our closest neighbor, an example, attracting those tech-based businesses and life science companies. They're using tax abatements, reduction of permit fees or impact fees, expediting speed to market whenever they can. So those are just some of the tools in a traditional sense that they're implementing. And then we've heard all throughout the state of non-traditional incentives like concierge services, even helping those site selectors, as far to finding school locations for families to relocate here and really incentivizing return to commercial office space that way.
I think we should include something like that.
Okay. Are there any other questions? So with that, we also have a sample business survey that we have created to send to our stakeholders in the business community. We're really looking to ask them two main questions. One is simply, why did you choose to open your business in Milton? We feel it's important to leave this question open-ended to really allow the opportunity for our business owners to share with us from their perspective what sets Milton apart in the region. And second, what would help to streamline the process of applying for your occupational tax certificate? We've had some feedback regarding the complexity of our process, so we want to hear directly from our business owners, get them involved, listen to how we can streamline this process for them and implement some helpful changes. And if there's any other items that you would like to hear back from our business community from, we are more than happy to include that in the survey that we plan to send out. We are aiming to send the survey out December 5th, and we'll give 2 weeks to collect responses there. So if there's any questions for me about the survey, I'm happy to answer them at this time.
And Rick, and then I got a question.
Yeah, I've just got a general question. We have a large number of home-based businesses, which is a flat fee if you only have one employee. Are you considering changes to that, or are you looking at leaving that alone? Do we have, and then what would be the impact if we are looking at changes? Which direction do we see that going?
So we are here tonight to gather that feedback from council to see if you have any interest in us researching further in going in one direction or the other. So based on the feedback you've been given this evening, we were going to, in the next part, go back to those fees to show you again and discuss any potential for what the council is feeling like the direction they'd like us to head in. And I have a project timeline to show you. Our next plan is to go back, take the survey, take the information you've given us, do additional research, and come back to you in another subsequent meeting with potential revisions and what those impacts would be.
Okay, so the survey would go to current occupational tax certificate holders, people who do business under that. It's not geared towards looking at changing the home-based.
It's actually to find out about our process. We're not going to ask the business owners necessarily about the fee structure. It's going to be about our process and being able to make that as streamlined and as simple for them as possible based on the information that they tell us that they need.
Okay, thanks.
Quick question. As part of this process, are y'all talking about putting this online to where you can renew online and pay online?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And it's easy for me to walk across the street, but I feel bad for some people who have to drive.
As you can see, our fee structure is quite complex. So it's always kind of been a stumbling block for us to be able to get that in an online format. But irregardless, even if we keep the current fee structure, we are going to work to get that online.
Okay, great. Paul? Or Paul and Jan?
Go ahead.
Bernadette, as you look at our process and somebody who's from this industry, do you find our process to be complex?
Yes, sir, I do.
You do?
I do.
And are the complaints that we're getting consistent with what you find to be complex?
It is a lot, especially, let me back it up. We have some people that are large businesses. It's not as complex for them. They're used to it. They have a team behind them. They see this in all the different locations. They have different maybe franchises. Then we have our smaller businesses. Milton has a lot of smaller businesses. They've never seen anything like this before, from even starting a business. How do you even start a business? Anita's team has great information out there on first stop, where to go, how to get your state requirements taken care of, then you come here and you see an application that has 4 options, and you don't really know where you fall because you don't even understand from the onset about what that means to be, and so they have some home-based businesses that may have, well, okay, I have my employee, but my brother also lives in our house and he works for me. So now they're outside of that home-based, so there's just so many complexities. It feels that we could potentially simplify for these business owners.
Okay, thank you.
As an interim sort of stopgap, we've created an FAQs document that does currently live on our website. Just while we're ironing out the complexities of this process, we're trying to go through and answer as many questions as we can. As you know, it's hard to anticipate all of the questions that we receive, but just things that they get at the front desk, the calls that I get, the calls that the finance department gets all the time. We are trying to incorporate a lot of those questions onto our website, just so that in the interim, we've identified ways to try to make it a little bit smoother for them.
Have we, on your survey that you're doing, is there any reason why we wouldn't consider picking out businesses and industries in neighboring communities that we would like to see move to Milton? And are there things that we could or should be doing to attract them to Milton? I'm just wondering whether, it just seems like there's an awful lot going on around us, and we seem to be pretty quiet. And is there a reason for that we're not seeing? I mean, there's some of the obvious, but are there some subtle things, this being one, that may have an impact on us, our ability to attract some others? So maybe surveying some of the key companies, et cetera, in neighboring that might be helpful.
So I want to make sure we focus on the occupational tax perspective of this tonight. You bring up a very important point. I'm hoping we're going to cull some of that out of the Deerfield study we're doing right now to determine truly, I agree with you, we're seeing significant demand in and around there, but not in our area. More of an economic development thing. With the occupational taxes, when you look at how they break out across all the different businesses, even the largest of our businesses don't pay all that much in occupational taxes.
But is what they have to go through in Milton enough to stop somebody that maybe is looking to put a second one in Milton, say, you know what, it's not worth the hassle? Is any of that going on? Are there things we're doing that hinders us in this category?
Perhaps.
They potentially, like I said, most feedback we get is from people that do come over from the immediately adjacent communities. So you hear from them the most because we are currently structurally different than them. But we don't hear as much feedback from those other communities. They come from a little further away because we're actually less expensive than them. So we're kind of like in this medium point. I would say I don't think our actual process to apply is putting up that much of a barrier to larger businesses like that.
Okay.
All right, if there's no other questions for me, I'll turn it back to Bernadette to go over our timeline.
So I'm going to take a step back for one moment and go back to our fee structure table. So now that we have a little bit of feedback on what to include in that survey, and also to look into for the local exemptions, I heard the technology sector is one of the areas we want to look into. Was there anything else from a potential, if we do stay with gross receipts, is there any other potential areas council would like us to look into, considering some exemptions potentially? Was anything about living and working in Milton, or possibly bringing employees to Milton, or anything like that, something that we'd like to consider having an exemption for, or even having the cap on the tax that an individual business would pay? Anything like that is of interest for us to do any further research on?
Questions from council?
I think you're on the right track, Bernadette. I think your more simplified approach at the moment is sufficient for me without layering on 6 more variables to consider.
Excellent. And just to put it in perspective, one of our highest paying tax is around $60,000. So that helps from an individual basis of understanding that's one of the highest taxes we collect.
Bernadette, I would appreciate it if you would send me a copy of this presentation. I'm not sure I'm grabbing the whole thing as quickly as you went through
Absolutely.
it. So I'd like it, and then be able to maybe send you a note afterward, after I had a
Absolutely.
chance to look at it more closely. But some of this is the first time I've ever seen it.
we can certainly do that, and I can even put some time on the
we all
next
get it?
agenda to get additional feedback.
Absolutely. We'll get it to all the council members.
And I would say just simple, I mean, more simple, the better would be a great step, but yeah, I really can't tell you tonight.
And this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
We're just starting
So I'll
now,
go to the
just looking for
timeline.
initial feedback, like the alcohol thing. It'll be coming back before you, and we'll build on each one iteratively.
Great.
I think it, go ahead, Paul.
If I could just make a comment on what I think I heard is a bit of a disconnect for me. If I think I heard you guys say in the beginning of this, we were looking at a way for this to potentially make our reliance on our property tax a little bit less significant. So the disconnect for me is to look for ways to incentivize businesses where there might be tax relief is a disconnect for me on that.
Yeah.
But let me restate.
Ease of processing, certainly I get. Complexity can go out the window, but I don't. Can you explain the disconnect for me, Heather?
Absolutely. As a team, to achieve that overall objective, what we've looked at, some of our work on this goes all the way back to former staff that we've worked with, and we've talked to our community. We thought maybe in Milton, one of the potential avenues we would present would be moving to a gross receipts model. Now that will change some status for some home-based businesses, but you could incentivize a potential category of exemptions similar to a senior exemption of property taxes, where overall tax revenue would increase, but may not burden some specific businesses that are smaller, for example. So if they had under so many employees, you might do an incentive for that. If they make under $20,000, they would only pay the administrative fee, for example. Certain things like that is what we were thinking that may help stair step into the gross receipts model. We at this time did not pitch or even contemplate combining the employees and gross receipts. We thought that was a large change for our business owners. But we did think that maybe removing that home-based fee might get us to that less reliance on property taxes and create a fee where it would incentivize, everyone would have the same fee structure regardless of where they worked out of. So one of the things today is if you work out of your home versus coming into brick and mortar and you make a larger revenue base, you're almost incentivized to stay in your home and not fill the brick and mortar spaces. So if one of council's goals was to fill brick and mortar, that wouldn't necessarily be achieved under the current model we have. So we kind of have a lot of things to discuss that we may not be able to answer tonight. But if you guys saw this tonight and said to us, nope, we want to be per employee, that would kind of stop a lot of things for us. But we're hearing differently. We're hearing we need more information. So that gives us exactly what we need this evening to know that we're not looking to just maybe go in the total per employee direction. We need to bring you back some other examples of some models we could do in Milton that maybe could stair step into a different direction.
Well, I think one of the measures we have to make is where we are as a city in our development for our tax base. So we're still a relatively new city by all standards compared to those around us. If you have to look at, too, the fact that we have an emerging business environment here in Crabapple, and what is that going to look like and what kind of tax base is that going to produce for us versus, and this is, in my mind, kind of a thriving environment here right now in Crabapple. There seems to be a sense of urgency to get here. There seems to be, at least what we're hearing from the development community, is that the spaces are filling and they're the businesses that have come, for the most part, have been successful. Look at Deerfield by contrast, where we have raw space that has been slow to develop or has been passed over by some of the development community, where you look at the development at exit 8, highway, or exit 9, exit 10, et cetera. How does Deerbrook get overlooked? And you skip from some of the surrounding steps to a Halcyon or a Avalon. How do we get missed? What is it that's missing? Is it a tax base consideration that we need to look at? So in that instance, I would look for incentives to attract the kind of businesses that would be appropriate for Highway 9. Might be different than those businesses for Crabapple.
And we can also look at, some of those don't necessarily have to be occupational tax based. We can, Anita mentioned a lot of incentives that are actually considered abatements. They're a little bit on a larger scale than just your annual occupational tax fee. They may waive taxes for so many years on a larger basis. They may give other kinds of incentives. Like you said, we have the impact fees, other things like that. So we could absolutely work with community development on some further research in that area if you don't want them to be related to the maybe long-term occupational tax structure as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, as far as the one concern I'd have is if we try to roll home-based businesses with just one person, so they already live in the city, they're paying property taxes. If we start to make that complex, a lot of those businesses are smaller. I would just say we want to tread carefully when we're talking about that. I think we get a lot more people probably applying for business licenses and actually claiming when they run their business. If we start saying, well, now we want you to provide gross receipts, and we start to add taxes and complexity to try to grow our tax base, I think that would be a disincentive. I think the opportunity from a tax base, and I said this when we were talking about budget before, if we look at, we're going to see property values within the Crabapple area, we're going to see more, and this is some of maybe the data you can help from a tax standpoint, separate from occupational tax, but property tax. As these vacant properties now are developed, I think we're going to see a rise, and we've already seen it. We've seen a 29% increase in property tax revenue in a 4-year period, or projected for the 5th year. So I was kind of going the same way with Paul, is I'd like to see property tax relief for people, but I think as we expand the base and we get more commercial property coming online, I think we're still going to see, even if we control our tax millage rate, I think we'll still see the property tax base grow just because we're developing properties that weren't here before. Because that's where my comment when I mentioned before is I'd like to see us, if we could potentially collect what we need from a tax standpoint and run our operations and look at, all the safeguards, but keep our taxes as low as possible and still keep our quality of living with the things that we offer. That, I think, should be, as a city, our goal. Make sure we can fund our operations, be forward-looking, but also tie in the model of, as we develop different businesses and people come online, we're going to be growing our tax base. Because like I said, the simplified approach I looked at from property taxes, I saw a 29% increase. If you look at back to 2019 to what our projected is, that's significant. And I think it's only going to go higher as some of these spaces around here go up.
Mind if I just jump in on that real quick? So, of course, tax revenues are a zero-sum game. If our expenses are the expenses, and of course, we're always going to try to work those back to be able to get the most out of our taxpayer dollars. I want to make sure we're coming out of this with the right message. This isn't about increasing taxes. So just want to be very clear on that. What Bernadette's talking about, our fiscal policy, the city's fiscal policy, where we try to continue to reduce our reliance on property taxes and increase our reliance, so to speak, on the other taxes, right? Zero sum. You push one down, the other one's got to pop up. So that's what Bernadette is referring to. At the end of the day, as long as we continue to find our efficiencies, make sure we're making the best use of our taxpayer dollars. If other revenues increase, like you said, Councilman Morrig, if we continue to see increases in other areas, that could potentially reduce the tax liability to our individual citizens. But I just want to make sure coming out of this does not turn into a conversation about increases in people's occupational taxes. That is not what this is about.
Yeah, Bernard, I think it's like the goal is to make it almost a tax neutral, really. I mean, is what you're looking for on current business owners. Because I would, for a business owner that moved from Alfred and Roswell and Alfred and Milton was by far the most complicated to get a business license. But now I got it down and it's easy. And so it's like, as long as it's online and, streamlined, it's much easier for me. So
Absolutely. Yeah. So I just went back to the objective really quickly so everyone can see that we do want to attract businesses while further reducing our reliance on property tax revenues. That is the overall goal.
I'd like to know a little bit more about why Roswell did what it did, and just have an understanding. I mean, that's such a spike that they're expecting. I mean, I would think that there's some reasoning behind that. And gain an understanding on how that's occurring and why they did that, and are they doing something we missed, or it just seems like such a tremendous.
I have a pretty good idea, but I don't want to speculate.
Same here. I just do know that their old model was a unique flat fee model that was pretty low on the flat fee scale. I don't know what made them go from that to specifically the similar one as Sandy Springs and Johns Creek, but I can certainly call over and ask, and I can also watch any meetings, kind of hear some feedback they received during their process.
And it may be, maybe when we, because I also need to kind of look at it again, try to wade through. But I wonder what the business mix, when we talk about types of businesses, how does Roswell stack up against Milton? You know, we're looking at the revenue, but really what's the business mix that they're getting X amount, especially with Roswell making a change. I would
They
wait.
didn't have they removed their home-based category in this iteration, so they're doing all gross receipts. But we can certainly get that additional information to show by NEICS code what kinds of businesses they attract. That's easy
Okay.
to obtain. We can bring that back.
Okay.
Anything else?
So we have some great information. I just want to make sure that we're treading in the right direction. Council as a whole would like us to look into keeping that home-based flat fee in addition to our gross receipts. Is that the feedback we're receiving tonight?
For the
To keep
time
them-
being, that's the
Okay.
way I'm hearing it.
Just want to make sure I heard that
think.
correctly.
It's for our first draft, sure.
Perfect. And then also looking at comparing what other types of businesses are in the surrounding communities, we can do that. We did pull a map of our own types of businesses in our jurisdiction, and it kind of just looked like a nice Jackson Pollock. And just decided that it wasn't as meaningful. We couldn't find a pattern or maybe where most types align, so we just scrapped that. But Emily worked really hard on a lot of maps, and we have different ones we can show you, and we'll bring back with her as well, and she can help us map in the other areas.
Yeah, I just wonder if we can see kind of, because I think of the different cities and I look at our city, I think I think we've got a different business mix. We don't really have a lot of hotels. We don't have convention centers. We don't have, like Paul mentioned, the Halcyon or the Avalon. I think we're looking at, without the opportunity of Highway 9, from an economic development standpoint, what can we attract so we are competitive? So I like the idea of looking at exemptions or different things that would actually pull in different businesses, because we see businesses right on our border. We see other cities growing where we'd like to say, okay, what can we do? Which I think is what you guys are saying. What can we do to try to attract that into our city also?
Perfect. So I'm going to skip forward to our project timeline, which is now going to just change a little bit, I think. So we kicked off our project originally back in October by creating our staff-led team that gathered the data presented this evening. Tonight, we obtained very critical feedback from council to guide our next steps in this process. On December 5th, we will distribute the business owner stakeholder survey with a 2-week timeframe for submitting responses. We were going to work throughout December and early January with our internal and external partners. We have a couple of people that are actually also from GMA and things like that to give us some feedback on how the processes work in other communities. They may be able to give additional information that you've been looking for. If we have substantial information in time to bring back in December, maybe we'll add a December work session in here. If not, we'll keep on that journey to come back to you January 18th with additional information to obtain that feedback. And then currently, based on this timeline, we were proposing having ordinance revisions to the council sometime maybe in February or March. Now, I just wanted to let everyone know that the state deadline, which Milton has to follow for occupational tax renewals, is March 31st. So our proposal was to say that potentially new businesses throughout 2023 would go into the new model, and then the renewals for 2024 would apply to the new model. So if we do change anything that would have a potential tax change for those businesses, they would have some time to prepare for that.
Adjust. Okay.
So does that sound like a good timeline for council? Excellent.
Yes.
So our team will go back to and address those things. And thank you so much for your time this evening and your feedback.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bernadette.
Thank you.
Okay, so there are no first presentation, public hearing, or zoning agenda items. We'll move on to unfinished business. Will the city clerk please sound the item?
Mayor, that item is consideration of an ordinance amendment to Chapter 56, Article 6, for registration of personal transportation vehicles and the use of PTVs on shared use paths. It's agenda item number 22341. Mr. Rob Del Ross.
Thanks, Amy. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight's item is focusing on 3 ordinance changes we have to Chapter 56, Article 6 in the City Code. In your packets, there's the presentation. Focusing on three changes for the ordinance tonight. One is the registration process that was recommended out of the adopted PTV plan several months ago in the summer that you've seen. Second item is clarifying the insurance requirements from an enforcement perspective, and from the city, we're viewing personal transportation vehicles, as no different in your car, and the insurance reflects that. The third language is defining what a shared use path is. These ordinance changes allow the city to designate shared use paths in the future that would be PTV eligible. And I'll show you the map of that. There are currently not any of those paths in existence today, so we're basically setting the framework for conversations in the future. I'm not going to read every word on the screen here, but these are in your packet, page 158. Page 158. I will highlight the red box at the top left. We're defining a shared use path as a pathway separated from vehicular traffic by an open space or barrier within the right of way. So think about that as a wide sidewalk. The minimum we would be looking for is 8, but preferably 10 to 12. That is separated most often by either a grass strip or a curb from the asphalt. The insurance requirements are going to be liability the same way as a vehicle. We're adding some language in our code to very clearly state that the driver of the PTV is responsible for proof of insurance if they're asked by enforcement. The bottom left box, registration and fee, this is the process we discussed previously. The city is recommending matching state law, which allows for a 5-year license. That will be $15. There's an example of the form that we've drafted for that application at the back of my presentation. You've seen this map before. The next time you see it will be a little bit clearer and easier to understand, but we're basically talking about the aqua lines, the light blue color on this map, and the legend defined as PTV accessible multi-use path. So you'll see paths primarily along 372 in this section, then making the right turn and then heading north up 372 here. Those aqua lines aren't in existence today. The ordinance changes allow those conversations for us as they're designed, as they're brought online, likely through capital projects, likely through T-Splosh 2, that you'll be seeing over the next 5 years. Sarah and I have started looking into the first major project that's going to be coming out of this. We're looking at this block. Let me see if you can see my cursor. We're around about a 372 heading north in front of the elementary school and then up to School Drive. We're looking for options to reduce some of the congestion that you see. If any of you have driven through that in the morning or the afternoon, that's one of the most congested parts of the city by far. So we're looking at some improvements both from a vehicular perspective and from a PTV perspective to hopefully allow residents to not have to hop in their car and drop the kids off at school. The next graphic, this is just a clarification. This isn't anything we're changing tonight, but we've had some questions in prior discussions with you and with residents. Based on the state law, based on the current city code, seat belts are not required in personal transportation vehicles. The state law reads hip restraints or handholds, which if you see in the picture are these devices that you hold on to on the side of the PTV. You will see some of these equipped with seat belts, but they technically are not required, and these ordinance changes is not changing that. Lastly, draft registration form. We are working hard on this, working with finance, working with PD to hopefully have this online first of the year. So registration form, we're trying to keep this as simple as possible. Contact information on the left, a list of eligible drivers in your household, and then a quick legal affidavit that you're signing in the bottom right corner. That concludes the presentation. You're here for questions.
Rick and then Paul.
So we're looking at doing a minimum fee for that would be good for 5 years per vehicle.
Correct.
And then the homeowner would have to have and actually have on the vehicle proof of insurance if they're operating on either the multi-use or within a neighborhood that were approved.
On any public street.
Okay, so they would need to have the insurance.
Can you clarify that? I'm sorry, on any public streets? you said?
So this, I should have specified that earlier. This city code only applies to public streets. So if you're in a gated community and you're on a private street, you're subject to your own HOA bylaws. The city code has no jurisdiction, no power on private neighborhoods.
So have we actually, when we were looking at the ordinance earlier, did we in fact say that these would be allowed on all, like say neighborhood private streets? Or did we kind of regulate where those were going to be initially?
So the way the ordinance was adopted in 2020, it applied to public streets of speed limit 25 miles an hour and below. So as of today, without making any of the changes we just talked about today, anyone is allowed, a licensed driver is able to ride in their personal transportation vehicle on any public street in this city that's signed 25 miles an hour and below.
Can a homeowner association regulate whether or not people can actually drive in their subdivision, even if it's not a gated community?
I don't know if that's happened, but my understanding is yes. There are multiple HOAs in our city that have done that.
I think that would be one that we definitely want to clarify and know on the front end before as we're going into the registration. I think it would be important to know, because if in fact the HOA can regulate and say, you know what, and with our neighborhood, no, we don't want to see these vehicles driving around. I think it would be important that we actually educate and let everybody know within the city that even though you live on a 25-mile-per-hour zone, if your HOA has said, no, you can't use these, then we need to make sure that that's actually known.
Once the registration process is online first of the year, we're planning some outreach with Greg. We'll add that to our message, yes.
Councilor Morrig, let me address that very. I want to make sure that our language is precise, and what I mean by that is every HOA is going to have different covenants.
Right.
So whether or not they can regulate or prohibit this activity is going to be a function of whether their covenants regulate or prohibit this activity.
Right.
If they do speak to this issue, then the covenants would control, because when you buy your property in that neighborhood, you are accepting that contractual provision that said, I can't do this because it's in the covenant. So I only want to make that point of emphasis, is that it may not apply because there may be covenants that don't address this issue at all. But if they do, yeah, I think the covenants and that community could in fact shut this activity down.
Would we also include, I mean, we're calling them personal transportation vehicles. Back when most covenants were put in
Golf
place,
carts.
they said golf carts. So I'm just wondering, are we equating the two, just so we don't get into someone where nuance and say, hey, we just said we couldn't have golf carts, but now I've got a PPT. And I don't even know whether we have subdivisions that limit those. I know ours, when I grew in it, it said you couldn't even have hammocks or trampolines. So the boilerplate originally was pretty restrictive. So I assume a lot of subdivisions have those to start out. And it may actually be in there, but I've not looked at individuals. I just want to make sure we don't get caught up with a 15-year-old subdivision that said prohibited golf carts, but now they can say, well, now we can do PTVs.
I can answer that unless you want to.
No, I think I'm holding down from the previous one. Go ahead.
Yeah, look, in the matters of enforcement, what their covenants say, again, I don't mean to sound redundant, is going to be how their covenants speak to this issue.
Yep.
But then going further, yes, I agree, there has been some evolution of the concept. Maybe back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, we thought of good old-fashioned golf carts are now kind of evolved to this different term.
Yep.
But I think in any enforcement, you're going to look at what a reasonable person would understand is off limits. And I think that'll control how this is enforced. And kind of if it looks, talks, and walks like a golf cart, it's probably going to be a golf cart. So that would be my thing.
I just know sometimes
Too loud, that was.
Sometimes people in your profession will definitely go to individual words. I just want to make sure we actually.
It's funny you say that, and this is one of the areas where covenants are more powerful than our quasi criminal ordinances, because obviously with our ordinances we're prosecuting them in city court. But in covenants, it's going to be a civil enforcement action, and that gives the regulating body a little more latitude because you're not talking about criminal sanctions, you're talking about fines. And so I think then they're given more latitude because a good defense lawyer, you're right, would, no, it's not a golf cart, it's a
It's not a
PTV
golf
for
cart,
heaven's
right.
sakes. There's a huge difference between those two, not
Yeah.
in civil context.
Okay, thanks.
Jan?
My concern is how we're letting members of the community know about this. And for example, at Crooked Creek, we have ordinance, nobody follows them. And we're gated and they use that against the managing, the folks that are trying to govern it. Where my concern comes in is more and more people get these, and the more this piece of equipment has involved, they look like small cars now. I mean, they've got the big fat wheels, they've got everything, but they're going out onto city streets. They're leaving their protection in a gated community and they're going out onto the street. And my concern is that, is the city doing enough to make all these individuals aware that, number one, that street is like a 40-foot Route 9. It's not 25 miles an hour. Are we doing everything to make sure people are aware of what these guidelines are and where they should or should not be with these vehicles?
Staff's hope, working with Greg, working with social media, is that once this, the logistics through the registration process is online and we have that form and we're open for business come first of the year, we expect there's going to be conversations we expect there's going to be questions. We expect there's going to be a dialogue about, wait, I thought that was legal, and simple naivety that they're not blatantly breaking the law. They just didn't know what the law was. To answer one of your questions earlier, from a city staff perspective, we use PTV and golf cart interchangeably. I tend to use PTV and when the ordinance, just because there's a rigid state definition of what a personal transportation vehicle is. And they do that because there's a difference between a golf cart and a primarily agricultural vehicle, or a ATV, or a low-speed vehicle. Those are all based by weight, based on maximum speed. They're all very strict definitions in the state code. Our city code references personal transportation vehicles, i.e. golf carts.
And we're really not changing the law today. We're really just making it more of the registration
Correct.
process. So this will actually probably make people more aware of where and how to use a golf cart.
We're reflecting the new registration process. We're kind of clarifying what the expectations are for insurance, and we're enabling ourselves to bring shared use paths online into our PTV network in the future.
But we have actually put an ordinance in to allow these to be on our 25 mile per hour or less streets within the city.
Yes, that was done.
So that's what's different. And I know now they're selling these at Lowe's, at Home Depot. I mean, you can now get them locally. So I think the use and people actually acquiring them in a city of relative affluence in Milton, I think you're going to see more people buy them. That's why I think it is important that we actually educate our whole public within the city of Milton of what the rules are and restrictions are.
Because I think a large number of them think because they're driving on the sidewalk or a dirt side, that a 25-mile-an-hour street doesn't pertain to them, but it does. And somehow we need to make sure they understand that. They think because they're not riding on the street that it's okay.
I agree with you. I've seen two behaviors, not necessarily in Milton, but just driving around. I've seen the golf cart on the sidewalk, which is, if we're going to try and be very clear, you should not be driving a PTV on a 4 to 5 foot sidewalk. Second behavior that I've seen personally, it may be a driver that has a very short gap, a short segment along a 35-mile-an-hour road that they know they're trying to get from point A to point B, and there's no way to get between and they decide, well, I'm just going to drive this quarter mile and no one's going to catch me.
The people used to do with mini bikes.
But they're subjecting themselves to a violation.
Yes,
if they
they
chose to do it that way.
Yeah. So I've seen them because I live in this area in the section that you had mentioned with the school traffic and everything. So I've seen them, golf carts going through the roundabout to get to the other side, near Starbucks and everything. So technically right now by law, the roundabout is connected to Birmingham Highway, which is a 35-mile-an-hour road. So they shouldn't be crossing over through the roundabout.
Technically, you should not be crossing at that roundabout because technically by state law, we need all of those crossings. If you have two roads that are 25 but up against each other and the main line is 35 or 40 separating it, technically to cross that, it's a state route in this case, we need a crossing at that location approved by the state DOT, and that's not in place yet.
And that would probably not be at the roundabout either, if I remember correctly.
Right,
where I
like
was
based
seeing
on
it
the
your
map that
maps.
you had,
It
the
wouldn't-
potential crossing would be probably at
So we're
Kensington
looking
Farms
at,
and
as part of that project that I talked about earlier, we're looking at a couple of different crossings north of the roundabout because we're expecting that the state DOT with the local district will not want to, I just lost my presentation, it's back up now. We're expecting them not to prefer it at the roundabout. So these pink lines, we're not expecting to get all three, but we showed that expecting one of the three to be approved. So either at Kensington Farms or at these two driveways.
And Rob, this map is not 100% reflective of some of the conversations that we've had before about some of our concern about the use on the sidewalk or the pathways in Crab Apple, correct?
Correct.
This is not a finished map yet.
This is a work in progress, as all our maps are. These aqua lines are not in place today, but they're representative of where we're aspiring to build them in the future.
Great. Couple more follow-ups from me, please. The discussion about the restraints, the hip devices or the handholds. I thought Chief at our last meeting talking about this assured us that we were going to require seatbelts.
So we've talked with PD. We've talked with a local business owner that he addressed to you 4 or 5 months ago in open comment and clarified that this is the state law and this is the city code. City code matches state law and state law does not require seatbelts for PTVs.
Ken, do we subject ourselves to any liability if there's an injury? If a state law is a state law, we're okay?
Yes, I'm not concerned about that.
Okay, and I sure would like us to see, I would sure would like to see us take it to a higher standard. So we've got young drivers might be more constrained with a seatbelt, but if that's not something that we can or should do, I guess I'll give up that.
I'll
hunt,
note
but-
just in conversation, there have been some of the older PTV models that have been going to the shop, going to the local business and getting seatbelts added as a retrofit just because they
You
want
could
that
have
added
them,
safety.
but it's not required. Okay. Also, I would just point out, I think I read in the packet that the way our ordinance reads, the PTVs cannot be capable of exceeding 20 miles per hour. I think that was in the packet.
If that's in the packet, that's correct. I have
Yeah.
it printed out here just on the screen.
Yeah. You don't happen to have the packet available, because I had one more question that I didn't bring my PC with me to refer to. It was just a clarification about the drivers and the licensing, and it was on.
So
That was the question I
chapter,
was
so
gonna
I'm
ask.
looking at
Age restriction.
packet page 158, chapter 56, article 6. Definition of personal transportation vehicle means any motor vehicle, number 2, capable of a maximum level ground speed of less than 20 miles an hour.
Yeah. Okay, so it is.
So by definition, if your golf cart can go 25, it's no longer a golf cart.
Yeah, okay. So in the packet on page 2 of your section, I don't have my packet with me. I didn't bring my PC with me. There was a clarification I'd like to get to, if you can pull that page up by chance. And it has to do with the definition. There's a definition I'd like some clarity on. I should have written a more complete note. I'll have to remind myself when I see the page. Yeah.
Page 1.
Yep. That's,
Definition section. Directing you where to go.
so I think let's see. Hang on right there. So I read under the main paragraph where license, I'm assuming that's supposed to say or license to operate a motor vehicle. The term license or license to operate a motor vehicle means any driver's license or any other license to permit to operate a motor vehicle issued under or granted by the laws of this state, including. Number 2 was confusing to me. The privilege of any person to drive a motor vehicle, whether or not such person holds a valid license. To me, that's in conflict.
It means they don't have to have a license? Is that-
And that's why I was troubled.
I'm looking to Ken for a little bit of
So,
help on
so
that.
Ken-
Or more, show me that again.
My understanding has always been that
You have to have license.
the driver of the PTV must be a licensed driver. Therefore, it must be 16 years or older.
So is number 2?
I'm not sure what that,
Is number 2 in conflict with our objective?
Privilege of any person.
That wouldn't pertain to any sort of a, almost a grandfathering, would it? Individuals that can operate them without a driver's license, but do so because of the length of time? Are we aware of anything like that?
I'm afraid, given that this isn't a section that we're changing tonight, this was passed in 2020, I don't know what the purpose of that might have
Okay.
been.
Well, can we go back and look at that? Because in my
Absolutely.
read of that, it looks like it's basically saying that's an exception to having a
Clearly.
driver's license.
Clearly.
And I'm not in favor of that.
And I wonder if that infers the privilege of any person to drive, meaning they're of age where they could drive the vehicle or could be licensed. But I think that's part of the education is we want to make sure this is not, hey, we now have the tag, but Joey is 12, but he's capable of driving. Well, he doesn't have a driver's license, so he cannot go on a public street or on the trail.
Yeah, who grants the privilege?
So,
Or
Rob, you
you've
showed
got a
a-
driver's license process to go through, I'm sorry. Or you got a learner's permit period of time. You're understanding how to operate a gross weight vehicle that's significant. And even though this is less than that, you learn the rules of the road,
Because you
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera,
think
how to
that's a
judge
good catch.
distance and speed and braking and all that kind of stuff. So if that's what that means, I would not be able to support.
We'll research that issue and get back to you.
Great, thank you.
My guess is you're going to find, this is a guess, you're going to find that in the state code.
I agree.
that's
I'm just
probably where
not
it
sure.
came from.
There's got to be a reason for it. And I
Question.
I'm assuming that has to be something to do with agricultural use or
We'll
something.
dig deeper into it and get an answer for you. Again, it's 2+
You
over
know,
2 years
that
ago,
has
but
to
we'll
be-
pull it.
You used to be able to drive
Yeah,
tractors.
thank you.
I'm guessing.
The sample form that you showed that when they apply and register with the city, there was a section on there that said, list all of the household members that are.
Yes, that was a
able to
suggestion from
drive.
last meeting that we
Mhm.
added to the form in the top right, trying to reinforce the licensed driver issue. We're asking whoever submits the form with their $15 to list the eligible drivers in their household.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which over the 5-year period, some people may then qualify that weren't on the list or.
Yes, that's
Then
true.
you can come in and update their application, I guess, if they have a new driver in the house or.
Yeah, it should be a requirement.
I guess my one ask or question is the enforcement of this, anytime the city implements new rules, laws, I mean, it's one of those things where I hope we're not going to pass this on Monday and we're going to have police giving tickets on Tuesday, So hopefully we're going to have plenty of time to educate the community and give warnings and all that stuff, right?
I don't want to speak for Chief Austin, but I've heard him speak here before
Okay.
talking about, we tend to not write tickets. We tend to do more of the education,
Okay.
more of
Remember that?
the gentle warnings. Steve?
Before you close this item, I just want to make sure I want to make one thing clear. Going back early on in the discussion, we talked about HOA's authority and their ability to regulate within their subdivision, gated or non-gated. Gated, of course, are private roads. City has no authority there, and they would manage that. In non-gated areas of HOAs, the city still has no authority to enforce HOA covenants. So if an HOA decides we don't want golf carts on our 25-mile-an-hour roads, that's an issue between the HOA and the members of the community that live there. The city cannot go in and say, sorry to people in this specific subdivision, you can't do it. We lack the authority to do that. That is going to be, like Ken said, a civil issue between the HOA and the members of that community.
Does that
Am I-
hold true?
Am I good there?
Yeah.
That held true on the other regulations about what it should be, the safety issues and all that. It's still all up to the HOA?
Well, the HOA,
Like allowing ones that can go 25 miles an hour?
they can't exceed our code. I don't think, let's break it up between private and public roads. On public roads, regardless, they have to comply with our city standards. If it's a public road, our laws govern. I don't know what happens on a private road if your PTV can go more than 20.
Well, they couldn't, their covenants aren't a license to violate our law, all right? So while we wouldn't be in a position of enforcing their covenants, they also can't use their covenants to trump our baseline regulations. So no community that can do that, little fiefdom to itself that is exempt from the law, but they can make it more rigorous and shut it down.
Rick?
It's just one last thing. I don't know enough about PVTs to know that all the new ones
get
that
the
are coming
acronym
out, they all only they go less than, or PTV, they go less than 20 miles per hour. I don't know. I mean, I've seen some of these things that they can go pretty darn fast. And I think people would assume, hey, mine's good on the road. So I'm just wondering do you know much about that technology?
I don't, other than I agree with you. I would tend to think as we get further into technology, you're going to get golf carts that can drive as fast as people want them to drive.
I just know up in Michigan, I have a relative who has one of those and I rode on it and it goes better than 25 miles per hour. But I think he would probably say that was his golf cart because it looks like a golf cart. But I guess that would be a question. Do they really go 20 miles per hour or less, a maximum of 20 miles per hour?
We have one, and there's a regulator that you can set the speed on it. So even if the pedal's all the way down,
It's only gonna
you're
go
only
so
going
fast.
20. Yeah.
Like the old golf carts that you could only go so fast on the golf course. Okay.
All right, any other questions for Rob? All right. No public comment, I'm assuming. We'll open it up for a motion then.
So we're adopting the process for the licensing, correct?
That
Or
all
the-
we're voting
The
on?
the shared path, the insurance, and the registration.
Has nothing to do about the correction that Paul brought up.
Because we can't change that because that's
Oh.
different code.
I'll make
Let's
a
look into
motion.
it before we make a statement like that. But
Well, we can't change that tonight, though.
no, not tonight.
Yeah,
No,
okay,
but
yeah.
let's. I'd
We're,
look forward
we're
to
going
that.
to research that issue and get back to you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Right.
All right.
I'll make a motion that we approve agenda item number 22341.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Jacobus and a second from Councilmember Morig to approve agenda item number 22-341. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. Good stuff.
Thanks, Rob.
So we'll move on to new business. Will the city clerk please say on the first item?
Mayor, that item is consideration of a resolution adoption, let me start over. Mayor, that item is consideration of a resolution adopting the 2023 City of Milton City Council regular meeting and work session schedule. It is agenda item number 22362. Mayor and council, provided to you in your online packet and before you tonight is the 2023 draft calendar that identifies the regular city council meetings and the work session meetings. Our goal is to get this before you in November so that you have a chance to review it and can approve it. So then that way staff can begin to prepare and fill out their next year events and schedules, et cetera. I just wanted to point out a few things for you if I could. You'll notice that with the way that the New Year's Eve and the Martin Luther King dates fall in January, we'll start off with Wednesday meetings. We'll have another Wednesday meeting in February. We are going to push in April in the pink, the meetings back by a week due to spring break in that first week in April. And then very similar in July, with the way that July 4th falls, we will be pushing back those meetings by 1 week. Otherwise, it's a very smooth year. So this is for you to review, and I will be happy to answer any questions or also ask for your approval.
Any questions from Ms. Kami?
No.
Everything looks good.
Open it for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve agenda item number 22-362.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Moore, again, a second from Councilmember Moore to approve agenda item number 22-362. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. So that will conclude that. Just a couple reports we have. The Milton voters approved all three of the referendums that were on the ballot to extend our homestead exemptions for Milton seniors. So that's a good thing. The law will be effective on January 1st of 2023. And anyone that wants to apply can come to the finance department. Few events coming up. We have Christmas and Crabapple, December 3rd from 2 to 6 p.m. December 10th, we have Pancakes with Santa. And so please check social media on that. So fun stuff coming. So good stuff then. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Any other reports?
I just want to say thanks to the Chief Austin and Lieutenant Bradshaw. Last Friday, we got a request from some students from private school that are in a government class, wanted to talk to us about a couple of topics. And Chief and Lieutenant Bradshaw, and then I attended also, gave plenty of time and answered the kids' questions or the students' questions. I just want to say I appreciate the continued engagement of, and these students weren't from Milton, but we reached out, we set the time, and I just want to say thanks for our police department actually engaging the community outside of Milton.
Stuff. Okay. We will open it for a motion to adjourn into executive session to discuss personnel, land acquisition, and potential litigation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
That it?
Okay. I have a motion from Councilmember Moore, second from Councilmember Jacobus. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. That's unanimous.
Get the video, you got the video going?
All right, motion reconvene.
Make a motion to convene.
All right, second, who's second?
Second?
All right, so it's Moore and Moore. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Make me a motion to
Moved.
adjourn.
Second.
All right, I'll do Paul and Andrea. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good night.
Good night.